Alright, I did a video previously about martial arts, and there was a slight disagreement, although it's only a disagreement on the surface, about the true meaning of traditional martial arts. Somebody had stated that traditional martial arts, the purpose of them is discipline. This is true, but this is only one of the purposes of traditional martial arts, okay? What happened is many people are familiar with Budo and Bujutsu, or I should say less familiar with Bujutsu. Okay, how it works is the samurai. Now, Tung Sudo, which is the martial art I'm trained in, is a martial art that comes from a military knighthood called the Hwarang, that were the knights of the kingdom of Silla in Korea. And I don't want to get all into that because that'll be confusing. Not many people know about the kingdom of Silla or the Korean martial arts that well. But Budo, which means way of the warrior, comes from Bujutsu. Now, Bujutsu is the technique of the warrior. Bu meaning warrior, jutsu meaning technique, bu meaning warrior, do meaning way of. Now, you will see this as the suffix of many martial arts. For example, karate do. Karate do means way of the empty hand, or way of the China hand. Okay. Now, with what would you call it? Jujutsu. That would mean the technique of gentleness, I think it is. So what I want to point out is this. How it works is the samurai caste of Japan was kicking major ass for many centuries, okay? Then what happened is there was a long period of peace. Well, what happens during a period of peace? You don't want warriors walking around. You don't want warriors, because warriors are dangerous. They become a liability when there's a long-standing peace. As you will notice, what happens when soldiers come back from war? They become a liability in some sense, and you need to find a way to keep them busy. So what happened in Japan was the warrior caste created what was called Budo. Now, Budo is the way of the warrior, which is utilized to cultivate the self through militaristic discipline. Now, karate-do, what's interesting about karate-do is not actually Budo. Karate was not a warrior tradition. Karate is a rural farming tradition. You will also notice, whereas many other traditions, be they Japanese Jiu-Jitsu or Japanese Aido, Japanese Kendo, most Japanese martial arts do make use of weapons in some sense or another. Karate-do does not use weapons. It's Okinawan also. It's not Japanese technically. It's Okinawan. But also what's interesting about Karate-do is that it is more influenced by Shintoism and Okinawan shamanism, or shamanism. So you will see more of an influence in the personality of the martial art being more heavily influenced not by Buddhism, as you see in Japan, but more influenced by Shintoism or Japanese rural shamanic practices. It became karate-do basically to make it more popular amongst the Japanese. The Okinawans are not the same as the Japanese and never were, so they changed the name from karate, like kara, which means can mean empty or China. So they changed it from meaning kara, meaning China, to kara, meaning empty, and te, meaning hand, and then the suffix do, meaning way of the empty hand. And then they influenced it more with the development of the self. Now, there is also karate jitsu, which you will very rarely hear somebody refer to it as karate jitsu, and that means the technique of the empty hand. Okay. Now, you see this in Red China currently. You see wushu, which also means way of the warrior. Now, wushu, unlike other forms of, say, unarmed Shaolin combat, like Kung Fu being used as a means of combat, wushu uses comically oversized weapons that look like they're from Dragon Ball Z or something. And it is more about it's more like a fine dance than it is a combat system. Although there are many Chinese combat systems that are pretty heavy duty, Wushu is more about the conditioning of the body, and also Tai Chi is another example. Tai Chi is a legit martial art, and the movements in Tai Chi are translated into Qin Na. Qin Na is a Chinese form of grappling, which is similar in many ways to Hapkido or Aikido, although Hapkido is it's more similar to Hapkido. It has to do with joint locking, bone breaking, things of that nature. But because these things pose a threat to the communist Chinese, you do not see these things being promoted by communist China unless it's in the military. You do, however, see things like Qin Na and more combat-oriented forms of Kung Fu being practiced in the United States. So you have to understand the discipline, and I'm going to get heavy into the different forms of why martial arts is important to society and things of that nature in a later video. But what I wanted to point out is the two things that are very, very important in traditional martial arts is self-defense and self-discipline. And it is true that MMA has taken us away from the concept of the self-discipline, which comes from the Buddhism, the Confucianism, and even the Japanese shamanic practices.